Welcome to the IT Chronicles, Tech in 10 at Knowledge 17. I'm Shane Carlson. I'm here with Carlos Casanova.
Shane.
And Ryan Hale from Ahead.
How's it going, everybody?
Excellent. Ryan, you guys are doing a lot of stuff with enterprise service management at Ahead. Why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of how you guys are approaching that, and especially some of the stuff you're doing here at the show?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Ahead booth, we're at 808. We've got a couple of demos that we're focused on. I run the ESM practice. We're one of 5 consulting practices, and what we're really focused on is a couple of things. One is using ServiceNow as the front end to all things cloud provisioning. So we've got ServiceNow hooked into AWS. We've got it hooked into Azure. We're starting to do a pretty good focus on security operations, GRC, and our pedigree. So everybody on my team has been in the ecosystem since 2010, 2011. So we've got the ITSM chops, incident, problem, and change is stuff that we can, we've seen it, we've done it, or we know somebody that has. But it's really around expanding the skill set to drive better business value outside of just, the traditional ITSM approach.
Excellent. So you'd say you do a lot of real consulting. So in that space, what exactly do you guys think differentiates yourself, especially in the practice that you're in, the enterprise service management? What is your guys' forte in that area?
Yeah, so I would say it's real world experience, real world exposure. Coming up in the ServiceNow ecosystem and the service management space, there was a period of time where it's like, well, is it in the book?
Yeah.
Right? Those were some dark days. Yes. Going off of what's in the book isn't always the best thing.
But that's not what ITIL says.
That's not what ITIL says, and that's totally cool. And what we really pride ourselves on is pragmatic, practical solutions, and being able to kind of coach and guide our customers from being able to say, hey, everybody thought that was a good idea 5 years ago. A lot's changed in 5 years, so let's not make that same mistake. Let's do it a little bit differently, and a lot of coaching around, hey, it's a framework. It's not a methodology, right? So a lot of the basic blocking and tackling are things that we pride ourselves on, and really trying to elevate the conversation.
Excellent.
So you mentioned security, I think, a little bit earlier.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about that, because that's one thing that, and I just had a conversation with someone about that, how it's really kind of infusing into all the other aspects of that. So, how are you playing that into the regular solutions?
Yeah. So from a platform standpoint and from a process standpoint, ServiceNow is just a phenomenal tool, particularly when you pull in governance, risk, and compliance. So it's a pretty logical step. We can either use that as a way to have the appropriate overlays with active projects, or sometimes it's that first entry point where, hey, we failed an audit, or we've brought in a new CISO, or we've invested in this because we saw something in the news, and we don't want to be in the news. Right. So we've got a few individuals at Ahead that specialize in governance, risk, and compliance, specialize in security, not only from a tools standpoint, so but the actual overlay. How do you build the right framework and the right control so you can control that?
Yeah. What kind of success are you guys seeing on the enterprise service management side of the world, and trying to kind of curry favor with the ITSM customers that you have? Are you guys able to take some of those learnings in the IT service management world and use that to bring that over to the ESM world and kind of help them with the business?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much of ITSM is transferable to the business. A lot of it's just learning a new language. So you don't call it a ticket, you call it a record, you call it a case. But at the end of the day, we've got customers that we're servicing. We need a system of engagement to take a record that's hopefully not via email, right? Pull that in and be able to manage its life cycle so we can control quality and control the experience. Email's a great way to notify somebody about something. It's a terrible way to manage process.
Absolutely. So are you still walking in and finding customers with a hodgepodge of different tools and things that you're having to kind of untangle and as you move people over to ServiceNow?
I would say less so now, but it still does exist, right? Everybody's got a spreadsheet. I think all of us are also guilty of that as well, right? We don't like to admit it, but it's around, reducing down to the most. I don't want to say the most basic, but you want to eliminate all the noise so you can focus on the right stuff. And a lot of that is, it's less around the technology. It's more around pulling apart, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Because when you're moving,
get them through the FUD.
Yeah, when you're moving off of somebody's spreadsheet, right? Like, my data is always correct, right? 99% accurate, 100% of the time. This guy's, don't trust it, right? And we want to be able to make sure that we can provide some practical coaching just around, everything's going to be all right. We moving things around a bit.
So, so when you're doing that, I guess that's got to be the challenge, right? Getting them to be comfortable with that, because I would think that's their biggest fear in self-preservation. It's not mine. That's not
Yeah.
How have you been reporting that to the senior leadership for the last 6 years when now we're looking at it and it's all wrong? So you're the bearer of the bad news in some cases. So, or exposer of the bad news. How do you handle that? Because that's got to be a challenge.
It definitely is, and sometimes those conversations are really easy, depending on the posture of the organization. Sometimes those conversations are hard, but the important piece, what we try to coach people on, is knowing it's broken, right? Not fixing it just means it's going to be broken for a longer period of time. So we're just kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, you got to keep people from getting mired down in the details.
Exactly. So it's setting up that end goal of where do we want to be, and maybe it's a 3-month goal, maybe it's a 3-year goal,
right.
And then how do you break that down into bite-sized chunks so that you can iterate through, and just making sure that people don't get too caught up in having delayed perfection. Right? We don't need to do it all. Don't need to wait for everything to be built for it to go live, either from a process or tool standpoint. We're going to do some small iterations, get some quick wins, and really, when you take that approach, my experience has always been, you get people knocking on the door of the project team being like, hey, I've been doing this thing through a shared list of email boxes, and that's how we manage our workflow. Can you help us out?
Yeah. So you guys have other practices outside of ServiceNow. You've got a bunch of different cloud practices, and you mentioned AWS and Azure earlier. What are you guys doing in that space from a cloud provisioning point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So from an ahead standpoint, we have a couple of groups. One that focuses primarily on what we call it config management. Probably raising a couple of hairs within the ITSM community, but that's basically our DevOps practice. So those are folks that are focused on, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, SaltStack. And then we have another group of folks that are focused purely on public, private, and hybrid cloud, and that's our AWS and Azure set of teams. And from an ESM standpoint, right, where we cross-pollinate, so we will deliver projects in tandem where we've got a team of my folks, a team from the DevOps group, and a team from the AWS and Azure group, and we leverage ServiceNow as the front end to do all the provisioning, spin up, spin down, build it on Service Portal so it's nice and clean, looks good, and really start to empower customers to deliver better service, because there's always those conversations of, well, I can just go to the internet and do this for myself, and I'm just not going to tell you. And we want to give a nice smooth road in avoiding that.
Right.
Perfect.
So so that integration, I guess that's an interesting thing we've seen with other folks, bringing in the DevOps and the ITSM piece, and sort of I think the confusion still around why one, why not the other. Do you get involved in that at all with your engagements where, where they're like, well, I don't know if we want to do this or that, and you're like, well, no, you kind of need to do a little bit of all
Yeah,
of them?
absolutely. So we have a lot of conversations with customers, particularly on the cloud provisioning side of things, where they'll engage ahead just to come in and do strategy, right? And the basic question is, we don't know what we don't know,
right.
And you guys probably know more than we do. So let's just have a conversation, and we'll come in, do a cloud strategy, set up a roadmap of achievable goals, and it's ServiceNow is the system of record, right? It's sort of the hub system that spokes out to all of these other ones, and we'll go in and say, this is how we're going to deploy this is how we're going to do that, pull it all in, and be able to report to the business.
It sounds like a pretty practical approach. Thanks for joining us today, Ryan.
Thank you
I really
guys very
appreciate
much.
it.